In an environment where you have multiple VMs on a host, you're going to want to be able to do some resource monitoring. In other words, we just got finished configuring dynamic memory. Well, you want to be able to monitor that to see if it's working out, to see what memory is actually being used. Maybe you can make some adjustments. And this kind of resource monitoring and sometimes performance monitoring in a virtualized environment in the past has been pretty challenging. Because if you think about it, a hypervisor is simulating a lot of things for a virtual machine. So a lot of the performance tools, if they weren't designed to understand the virtualized environment they were in, would start showing erroneous numbers, and that's not very helpful. In fact, we used to use tools, do a lot of manual calculations, trying to figure out things like disk IOPS, input output per second, just getting past that virtualized layer. Well, in Server 2012 R2, you have resource metering. This is a way to get resource information to help you do things like balance out your dynamic memory settings, and to get good information, good numbers from the host and the virtualized machines. So we're going to do that, and we're going to do this resource metering. Now, the interesting thing is it's done in PowerShell. So let's take a look. I'm going to open up PowerShell, and let's take a look at a commandlet called get-vm. As you can imagine, get-vm is going to give me a list of all of my VMs, and you can see representing what was in the graphical. There's server 1, it's been running, and here's server 2, that's still turned off. Now you do have commandlets to control the VMs, start them, stop them, and configure all the VMs, just like we've been doing in the graphical. But let's focus in on server number 1. So I'm going to say the name here is server 1. And I want to get more property information from this. So I'm going to say format list. And let's take a look at these properties. Now I'm going to scroll up to the top, and you can quickly see that these are going to be the configuration settings of this virtual machine, the things that we did when we set it up. I'd like you to take note, though, of the state is currently running. Its name is server 1. And I'm going to scroll down here a little bit, and let's take a look at this property right here, resource metering enabled set to false. So your virtual machines don't have resource metering turned on by default. In fact, you can do this. You could say, let's look at all the VMs on this machine. We'll just say get VM, which will get all of them. Say select object property, and look at that resource metering. This will help you out if you want to do this in larger scale. Enabled. If I've typed it correctly, let's see. Yep, it says that it's off. And of course, I probably want to put in something in here to help me address what's the name of the VM. There we go. So you can see that they're disabled. And now when you want to turn on resource metering, we have a commandlet for that too. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn it on for server 1. Clear the screen, and let's do get VM. And the name is server 1. Let's enable VM resource metering. Well, again, got to type it right. Resource metering. Notice I like to use the tab key. That helps me become aware if I'm typing in something incorrect. This is all you need to do to be able to turn on the resource metering for it. Now we can start to look at it. We've got some commandlets for VM resource metering. And if you want to define those commandlets, do get help. And I'm going to do star VM resource star. You can see a list of them here. You can enable it. Obviously, you can disable it as well when you don't need it. And you can reset the counters when you want to reset it to take on some new stats. But the commandlet that we want to gather additional statistics from our VMs isn't listed here because I typed in VM resource as part of my discovery with get help. Really what we're looking for is, you could find it if you just did -VM, and I'm going to put the verb in here because the verb is also a little unusual. It's measure -VM. And you know, if you've worked with PowerShell, we have a lot of commandlets that measure things for us, and we're going to be using measure VM. So here's how we use it. Let's do get help, or get help. Let's do get VM, and we'll take the name server 1 and pipe it to measure VM. There we go. Now you can see we get some properties across the screen. It gives us some basic information. What I always like to do is I want to be able to choose the properties I want. In this case, let's go ahead and list all of the properties for this. So format list and star. and take a look at some of the settings in here for this server. As a matter of fact, I like it down here. Average processor usage, which is what we're seeing across the top. The average memory usage, look at its maximum memory usage. Now, I had this set for a maximum memory of like 4 gigs, and so far, if this server, this is what it looked like after days and days and days of being used. I don't need that maximum anymore. Look at his minimum. So his minimum is pretty much in line with what I've been working with. And you get some additional information about this VM as well. So you can see that the resource metering is going to become very useful to help balance out these VMs. It gives you great numbers. Now, when you're done, when you've successfully found what you wanted to, you can turn off that metering. So let's say for server name server 1, and I want to disable VM resource metering. I can now turn it off. Now, besides resource metering, there are some other things that we can do to improve different performance aspects of the VMs. And that's what we want to look at next when we look at configuring your guest integration services.